Welcome to another episode of Cinema Shame. My name is James Patrick. In this episode, we're continuing our talk about Burt Reynolds. If you've been paying attention, I may have flubbed the film chronology a little bit. This episode begins with The End, a film that came out the year before starting over the movie that concluded Part 1. The reason is because I am an imperfect human, but also because I wanted to tackle starting over and Semi-Tough in the same conversation with Carrie Rickey. The End, anyway, is far more apropos to kick off the episode about the latter half of Burt Reynolds' Hollywood career. It's about a man struggling with his own mortality and his place in the world, no matter how much time he has left. It all flows better this way, I promise. Most would consider the next decade of Burt's career the bad years. Maybe that's true, but the 80s showed a Burt Reynolds that was willing to try anything and break away from expectations. The 80s also represented a more difficult time, personally and professionally, for Burt. On the set of City Heat, a stuntman picked up the wrong chair, not a breakaway chair, and hit Burt Reynolds across the jaw. He didn't work again for 2 years. Then the rumors began that he had AIDS. In his autobiography, he says, "My makeup man and my dentist refused to touch me. I lost 40 pounds, which only added fuel to the fire. I wasn't well enough to work, but nobody wanted me anyway, and I couldn't blame them. Why would you hire someone who was terminally ill?" It wasn't AIDS, but a condition known as temporomandibular disorder, also known as TMD or TMJ, which affects the joint that connects the lower jaw and the skull. It disrupts your balance and all of your sensory perception. Burt said it felt like being seasick all the time. He couldn't lie down. He couldn't deal with bright light or bright noises. He says he saw a dozen dentists before he went to see a retired San Diego dentist by the name of Gus Schwab. By the time Gus Schwab realigned every tooth in Burt's mouth, he had already become addicted to a drug called Halcyon, because it was the only thing that would relax the jaw. Burt said, "I was a zombie, but I didn't care. I would have done anything for relief. I kept taking Halcyon, and my tolerance went up. It got to where I was taking 50 a day, and I was sleeping longer and longer." When Burt Reynolds walked back on the Tonight Show finally, he brought a little black book, he said, that contained the names of all the people who deserted him during his long ordeal. He opened the book and began tearing pages out one by one. Johnny Carson said, "You know, I've done that too. It makes a hell of a fire." The audience erupted. And Burt says, "For the first time in months, I felt hope for the future." Unfortunately, it took Burt longer to kick the Halcyon addiction. One day, he decided to quit cold turkey rather than check himself into the Betty Ford clinic. He slipped into a coma, and the doctors believed he wasn't going to survive it. But after 8 or 9 hours, he woke up and never took Halcyon again. So when we talk about Burt reinventing himself in the middle of the 1980s, it was about Burt coming out again as a Hollywood actor, finally being liberated from all the rumors and scandal that had been printed in the tabloids. Burt came back on his own terms. They probably weren't the terms he would have liked, but he did it his way. So in many ways, this isn't the portrait of a star in decline, but a portrait of a star reinventing himself when everyone else had pretty much left him for dead. So let's get this episode started with The End.
Oh, I saw the movie last night. That scene is so touching and so lovely. Was he fun to work with?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes,
You
very
really
much.
like him, don't you?
Doesn't he look like a G.I. Joe? Doesn't he? I'm trying to convince everyone that he does. With his beard, he looks more like a G.I. Joe.
Donald. Strike that, the wheel. Get it out of here.
I'm very happy to be joined by Brian Saur of Rupert Pupkin Speaks and the Pure Cinema Pod and Just the Discs Pod. He's coming to me all the way from across country in California. How are you this evening, sir?
I am great, sir. I mean, outside of, that we're talking about a fallen star that we adore.
Yes.
I'm good. I'm very good.
That's not the great part of it. It is also your birthday, so happy birthday.
Thank you. Yes, and this is a fun way to close out my birthday, actually.
So I offered you up the entire Burt Reynolds filmography, and you came back to me with The End.
Yes.
Why did you pick The End?
I think, it's Burt's second go at directing. He had done Gator a couple years prior to this, and I think Burt is a really interesting director. I mean, obviously, I love him as an actor. I love him as a movie star. He is truly one of a kind. I'm sure that's been said a lot in this episode so far. But
bears repeating.
Yeah. But as a director, I think he, you can see him improving as the years go by. And I think The End is a really interesting second film because it's... I mean, this is something we say a lot on Pure Cinema, but this is definitely a movie that wouldn't get made today.
No.
Because it's just an oddball. I mean, I think it's the reason I picked it, I think, is because it's an example of him directing and doing a pretty solid job at it in what is a real difficult tonal balance of a movie to pull off. That I would argue he ultimately does pull off, although, your mileage may vary.
The End, starring Burt Reynolds as a man who's about to die.
What's that supposed to mean? It means lying in the ground with dirt on your face and holding your breath forever.
Facing death, he's determined to commit suicide,
That's right, baby.
even if it kills him.
I'm in love with the idea of killing myself. You're sure having a hard time doing it? Will you come on? Okay, on second thought.
Burt Reynolds, in The End, rated R.
Now playing at a theater near you. Check your newspaper for listing.
I mean, because the movie starts with Burt in a doctor's office basically being told he has 6 months to live. And I've always found Burt to be like very, I mean, he's obviously incredibly funny. But I love it when he plays against the sort of masculine, machismo, because he can do both things. And I've always found that sort of flexibility and the way that he can just laugh at himself to be one of the reasons I think he is such a great movie star.
It was effortless, really, for him. The charm came so easy. It's something that people can look back on and go, wow, I didn't know Burt Reynolds could do that. But I talked about this in what will be, I presume, a segment coming after this. We'll have to see, about his relationship and rapport with Joe Clayburgh. So he could play off all different kinds of women. And this is a very different side to that same persona.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, two things. One, the movie's all about death, and basically the Burt Reynolds character, he sets up a great joke, and you can kind of see him teeing it up, but he's just like, tell me how long I've got. Doc, I can take it. And he says 6 months, and he just breaks down and just like starts basically weeping and just wailing, just way over the top. But it's very funny in a way that only Burt can do. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But then the whole movie, is him, sort of going back to his family. He has a daughter played by Christy McNichol. Yeah. A girlfriend played by Sally Fields. You have kind of a revisitation of Smokey, but in a totally different way.
She plays such a off-ball, quirky, vapid character here.
Yeah, like,
and he
not
comes
giving
in and
him...
just belittles her about how dirty her apartment is.
It's a really odd character because he is kind of a dick, and he is... he's obviously he's narcissistic, and that he starts thinking about suicide, and he's looking into ways to kill himself, and ends up in an insane, well, not insane asylum, but a mental hospital with Dom DeLuise, offering ideas to help him kill himself, and it gets kind of out there. But just the idea that you would do this comedy about facing death and suicide and all these things, it's clearly something he was, I guess, dealing with. And I found it interesting to watch the movie now because it's a full 40 years since this movie came out, and obviously we know he lived. He got another good 40 years out of it. So it's there's a sort of a silver lining looking back. It is weird to see an actor who's just passed away, pointing a gun at his head and choking himself and things like that. But ultimately, I found it an interesting revisit. Now, you're saying this was the first time you had seen it, right?
This was the first time I'd seen it. It had always been on my watch list. I mean, I kind of try and watch everything that Burt Reynolds has done over time, and this one just didn't get watched. I picked up the Olive Blu-ray, and it sat there, and
Oh, you already had it. Nice.
I had it. It was Burt on Blue. Is pretty much an automatic purchase for me.
Oh yeah.
So I was glad to have that opportunity to toss it in today, and it wasn't what I expected. The cover leads you in certain directions, and Reputation leads you in certain directions, and the inclusion of Dom DeLuise also does as well. So you expected kind of this cannonball run with death, maybe.
Yeah. No, I could see that based on the
and there is some of that broad humor, but it's all, it's coming from a very dark place at the same time. Really? So the antics that he and Dom DeLuise get into as they're trying to kill Burt, like the scene where they're dangling from the tower, and Dom DeLuise is going to drop him, and then he panics and doesn't want to drop because he doesn't think it's going to be a far enough fall. And then they twist him around because if they decide that if he's going to hit his head, it might be a far enough fall. And then it's on grass, and then they end up dropping Dom DeLuise, and he confirms that it's not a far enough fall. There's a cartoon kind of oddly sequential storytelling here. And then it's mixed in with these very earnest conversations with his family. I'm thinking specifically of his conversation with his daughter. He takes her out to have fun, and they're sitting there, and she's like, you're acting totally weird, Dad. What's going on? You're not back in the hospital again, are you? And he says, definitely not. Promise not. And there's this really wonderful interaction that it kind of got me, a little choked up.
Yeah. And you were talking about the ending too, without going into too much detail, but
right.
I feel like the ending could lose you too if it's not done right, and there is an emotional hook at the end, and I thought it was really, like I said, I think it's not an easy thing to pull off as a second-time director.
Oh, it's not an easy thing to pull off as any kind of director. The line this movie walks, it's pastiche, but somehow it all comes together in that a lot is heaped on that ending. You're really curious to see how this is going to end, because is he going to succeed in killing himself? Because that's where we're headed. Is there going to be a last minute reprieve, like just kidding, you're super healthy, Joe versus Volcano, fake brain cloud kind of thing, like where are we going? And then we get this scene of him deciding to swim out endlessly into the ocean, and then he decides he wants to live, no matter how much time he's got. And the monologue that the internal monologue that he's spinning as he's desperately trying to swim back to shore is kind of the culmination of all this screwball, and as he's promising to learn the 10 fucking commandments or whatever he says, like he's gonna cherish the people and the lives, and he's gonna stop selling lakefront or oceanfront property to for land without ocean, and it's a very personal speech, even though it flows in and out of these punchlines.
I want to live. I want to live. I can never make it. Help me, Lord. Please. I promise not to try and kill myself anymore. Save me, and I swear I'll be a better father. I'll be a better man. I'll be a better everything. All I ask is, make me a better swimmer. Oh, God. I can't do this to Julie. We can't do this to Julie. Oh, God, let me live, and I promise to obey every one of the 10 commandments. I shall not kill. I shall not commit adultery. I shall not. I'll learn the 10 commandments, and then I'll obey every fucking one of them. Just get me back to the beach. I'll be honest in business. I promise not to sell lakeside lots.
Yeah, no, I think it's really well done, and I think it's, as you'll come to, I'm sure, a lot with talking to people about Burt movies, there's something about Burt that allows for the emotional hook. It allows for the tonal balance. He can do things that are difficult because he's Burt and we like him in a way that
he can get away with so much just because
it's crazy.
He's got that laugh and that smile.
It's crazy how much he can get away with. I think it's pretty remarkable, and watching this movie was reminding me of that. I think the other reason I picked it is I love the supporting cast outside of Dom DeLuise and Sally Field. It's pretty great.
It is. Myrna Loy pops up. And,
Myrna Loy's his mom. Pat O'Brien's dad.
I saw him and I'm like, I heard the voice. Like I saw him and it didn't register. But then I heard the voice and I'm like, is that Pat? That's Pat O'Brien. And you go pull up your phone for IMDb and it's like, holy hell, Pat O'Brien and Myrna Loy together for one scene. And it's again, it's another one of these really earnest moments.
Yep.
And Myrna Loy is fabulous.
Oh, love her so much and not surprised.
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one. There's a great, I think, a fun scene with Robbie Benson as a very young priest that he's going to confess to. I'm a big Robbie Benson fan, so, like, not that he can do no wrong, but I find him pretty funny in the scenes with Burt. I think they
he's got some of that. I never thought about it before, but he's got some of that same Burt DNA. Young Robbie Benson.
Oh yeah,
like the smile and the wit. Like they were on the same wavelength in that scene. I can't imagine that they weren't having a good time.
Yeah, it looks like they are, and I just think that's a fun scene. It's another one-off. Like he's not in the movie anymore after that.
Yeah.
Joanne Woodward is his ex-wife. Norman Fell is his doctor. Carl Reiner is another doctor.
Who he kills.
Yeah. That's a great... You could see that one coming, too.
Yeah.
There's a great... Right now, it's my Twitter banner. There's a great scene with James Best. That's just a real brief... he needs to use the phone, and James Best is like a hospital patient who's had some kind of head injury and something else, I think. And he's dragging around his IV, and Burt, tricks him into getting off the well, no, he actually turns up his IV and James Best, to his credit, does a great good quarter scene out of focus against the wall next to the phone, where he's sort of stumbling and falling down, and then you see the orderlies come while Bert's having his conversation, and I think it's him. I'm pretty sure you see him disappear off into out of focus and stuff. So I just thought that was a great, again, one-off. The kind of thing that Burt can do because he's Burt and he knows all these people. Come in and do one scene for my movie, and they're all great one-off scenes. You know,
it's amazing how it all fits together. It really is. And I mentioned this when we were in the last episode we did on the Bad News Bears, when I said that 70s films often felt like they were scribbled on cocktail napkins and taped together. And this movie is just a bunch of cocktail vignettes taped together, and the only thing that ties them together is Burt.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's good stuff. I'm a big fan.
And I was even perhaps more surprised about any of this, that this movie was a big hit. Like,
oh, I didn't know that.
At the box office. So it was made for $3 million. $3 million budget, but it made 44 domestic. 44. Wow. 44.
That's crazy.
This is the height of Burt, though. So
yeah.
Some of that is just got to be attributed to star power. But 44 million in 1978 is still a big number, Burt Reynolds or not, for this type of movie, because they went to see it, and I know it didn't get great critical reviews either. Like, it was largely kind of negative mixed. So this was people going to see it and then recommending it, and this is a movie that we said would never get made today. Like, not even a question in my mind.
Yeah, and especially not with a big star like that. I wouldn't think. I mean, we have some adventurous A-list stars right now that will do interesting things, but this movie is just too dark.
It's too dark for a studio to do, and that's what this was. This was a studio production.
Crazy to me. Yeah, again, star power of Burt, big studio. Yes, do whatever you want.
Right.
Comedy about death and suicide? Yes, go ahead and do that. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure they were just as surprised as he might have been that it made that much money. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning the writer of the movie, Jerry Belsom, who factored into some Spielberg projects by the name of Close Encounters and Always.
Nice. He also wrote Smile, right?
Smile, yeah, and won some Emmys for the Tracy Ullman show. So
cool.
He had a varied kind of a mixed bag career. Made a name for himself in TV, but he's got some pretty solid credits there in the film side as well.
Yeah, I'm a big Smile fan. Big. That's where Bob Freelander actually comes from.
Yeah, the Smile is, I could go on and on about Michael Ritchie, but
yes,
I did that already kind of in the last show.
Yes, it was great.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good way to end the end.
Okay.
If you had any more thoughts about that one-offs or recommendations?
No.
Or no?
I think I'm good on this one.
Okay, good. Wonderful. And we'll have you back in a couple years. Name 11 years to
11 years. Yes.
11 years. We'll see what happens then.
All right.
And this paperwork. I want everything to be just so for our first guest. So let me. All right. This out of the way. I believe we're ready. It's truly a pleasure to welcome my first guest to this program. He is currently co-starring with Clint Eastwood in a film called City Heat. Please welcome Burt Reynolds. Hi, Burt. Nice to meet you. How are you, sir? Good. Over there. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
What do you think? The audience loves you. That makes you feel great, doesn't it?
It makes me feel wanted.
Yeah. How long ago did you actually live in New York City?
I lived here, I came here in 1957, 56. And I was here about 2 years, but I didn't live here. I just, I just kind of existed on pigeons whenever I could grab one. Rip the head off one and just fed it. I lived with Rip Torn, which is a strange existence in its own right.
Yeah. was this fun at all, or was it just overwhelmingly peculiar?
It was both, which has been the story of my life.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly peculiar and fun. I was going to acting schools, which I got kicked out of, most of. I went to the...
Why would they kick you out of an acting school?
Because I couldn't act.
Oh.
Hey, ask a dumb question like that, you're going to get an answer like that. And then I went to Stella Adler. She was terrific. I liked her a lot. You just kind of sit on the floor and stare at her knees. She praises you a lot.
Yeah.
But I never acted.
Yeah.
Then I finally ended up with Win Hanman, who was wonderful. He was very kind, and I was real shy in those days. And I was real shy. And
all right, for my next segment, I have Grant, a.k.a. Mentors Camper on Twitter, a.k.a. the Notorious Carry Troller. How are you doing, Grant?
I'm doing great.
Excellent.
Great, James.
I am very excited that Grant wanted to come on this episode because he offered to do what many would consider the nadir, the Burt Nader, if you will. But I think there's stuff to like in all three of these movies that we're going to talk about. So we're going to start with Stick from 1985, which was also directed by Burt Reynolds.
Is Stick. The mob took his money, killed his best friend, then set him up as the fall guy. I want him to take it.
Play around with those people. You're gonna get hurt.
They're playing a deadly game.
He owes me $5,000.
And he's not about to be the loser. Because if you get him mad, you can be sure of one thing.
Give me a hand!
He's going to get even.
Why don't you push me hard? You might hit the water.
Burt Reynolds.
You know what I came here to ask you for.
Candace Bergen.
I don't know if I'm ready for you, Ernest.
George Siegel. And Charles Durning in Stick. The only thing he couldn't do.
What the hell are you drinking? That regular or apple?
Was stick to the rules.
Apple. I'll say goodnight.
Now, why did you want to talk about Stick?
Well, I think Stick and Heat and Malone are kind of like this trilogy of films where Burt's trying to reinvent himself as kind of like a more serious action star. Maybe not reinvent's the wrong word. I mean, you know, he did Dan August and he did serious cop stuff, Sharky's Machine, stuff like that, but we really hadn't seen that from him in a long time. And but I feel like they're worthy efforts. I mean, Stick is kind of like an insane movie. I mean, Charles Durning in that movie is just like, you know, it's like if Kingpin and Rip Taylor had a baby or something. You know?
He's amazing in this movie. I love that he keeps popping up in Burt Reynolds movies, sort of like this unsung hero in Burt's career. The two had a wonderful pairing. Though Durning never had a huge role in any of the movies, but he's always welcome.
Yeah, I just rewatched Stick and Heat this week, and I like Stick. I mean, like a lot of Elmore Leonard adaptations. It's not a good Elmore Leonard adaptation, you know. I mean.
There's really only one great Elmore Leonard adaptation, and the other ones just, you know, they're something else. You know, they attempt to hit that tone. Like I'm talking about Out of Sight. I mean, if you that's the obvious one for me. but the dialogue is so important to Elmore Leonard novels, and it's not something that comes across easily on screen for some reason. It's the cadence, whatever it is about Leonard's prose. And Stick is another example of the ways that it can go horribly wrong.
Right. Yeah, it's like, the clunky cans being tied behind a car, like a Just Married type thing, it's like the Elmore Leonard elements. You can see them, but they're just hobbling along. Like Durning's character, you can tell there's something going on there that had from Elmore Leonard.
You can see that. You can see that character. Like, you read that book, and you can see that character come alive, and in no way, shape, or form does it look like that. But in some abstract way, you can see how the steps that it took to take him there. Like, it's like, how do you make this character cinematic? Yeah.
I would watch a TV series. I would religiously watch a TV series that had Charles Durning's Chucky, kind of. I mean, I see it like sort of a Better Call Saul type of thing, or something like that. I mean, I think that would be pretty amazing.
I mean, he's one step away from a recurring character on Magnum PI, really.
What do you mean, come and get him, you son of a bitch? This is my house, not your house. Nobody told me what to do in my house. I don't think that gun scares me either. I'll take it away from you and shove it up your ass so far you won't be able to breathe for a week. Now give me those goddamn pills before I throw you right off the fucking balcony.
Yeah, and I like, when I watch Stick, I kind of think of it as sort of kind of like a distant relative, kind of like a black sheep uncle in Die Hard and Lethal Weapon's family. In their family tree, like when like the scene where the albino villain is falling off the building, it reminds me of that scene with Alan Rickman, I mean, like, there's just little things that pop up that make me think of Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. I don't know why, it's probably just me, but that was one of the things I noticed.
Well, there's some Stick, Heat, Malone. These all have just a tremendously bad reputation, and there are, in each of them, there are flourishes of competency, and whether these flourishes add up to an entertaining experience is something entirely different. I quite like. I said I like Stick and I like Heat, and it is because of Burt. Not despite. And I know that there's the knock on Stick was that Burt shouldn't have been directing Burt in Stick. Like, Burt could have directed somebody else in Stick, or Burt could have starred in Stick, but the two of them didn't go together. It's clear that Reynolds had an immediate connection to the material, seeing the setting was Florida, and he wanted to create a star character for him to play again, as his trajectory in the mid 80s had taken a sharp decline after. You're looking at Stroker Ace in 83, Man Who Loved Women in 83, Cannonball Run 2, which was another just regrettable, City Heat, and all these movies were just busts.
It was so weird because I remember pretty clearly when the trailer for Stick came out, and just like among my circle of friends at the time, we kind of had the same reaction to that trailer, like the famous "What are you drinking, Ethel?" or just it showed like really cool scenes and in the trailer, and it reminded me of when the trailer for the Dirty Harry movie Sudden Impact came out, and we hadn't seen a Dirty Harry movie in so long. I mean, I think The Enforcer was 1976 or 77. So when that trailer came out, everybody was excited. Oh my God, Clint Eastwood's back. And it was kind of the same thing when the trailer for Stick came out. Now, Burt had been doing films nonstop for a long time. But like I said earlier with Sharky's Machine, I think a lot of people just tuned out on his career, so it made it seem like he hadn't been around.
Yeah, Hollywood tried to kind of push him into that sort of sentimental 80s leading man, like the snarky but lovable mold that had become popular, and that just really didn't go over all that well. Starting over in 79 came together in the best possible way for Burt, but after that, the 80s were not kind to Burt. And, he took it upon himself. And this movie was probably doomed from the get-go. The studio rejected his first cut, and Burt, famously said at the time that he thought it was a great film, and the studio made him reshoot the entire second half of the movie. Burt said, if you watch the first half, that's what the whole thing should have been. Leonard, of course, disowned the movie as well after he saw the final cut. I unless I'm mistaken, I believe that he never spoke to Reynolds again after that.
One of the there's a lot of lost opportunities in Stick, obviously, but I think there was a good opportunity for like a fun, kind of bantery side love story. Unfortunately, they cast Candice Bergen. I love her TV efforts, but I think she was just horribly miscast in that role. I mean, I would have put someone in, like Ann Archer or Susan Sarandon or somebody like that, who I think would have been more lively. I mean,
they gave her such an
Bergen
edge. They always gave her such an edge in her films when they were still trying to figure out what to do with her.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm partial to Ann Archer. I mean, if you ask me who should have been in the female lead in any 80s movie, I'll tell you Ann Archer, even if Ann Archer's in the movie. Ann Archer was the female lead. Well, she should have played another character or something.
I can't disagree with that. Ann Archer would have been good.
But like what you were saying about casting Burt as like the lovable hero or whatever, I think Heat is a really good movie. I mean, I think of those three, of Stick and Heat and Malone, Heat unfortunately is, in the middle of those, sandwiched in the middle of those two disasters.
Could you tell me something about yourself, please?
Well, I've been knocked down, blown up, shot at, and fluent in 4 languages.
Well,
don't interrupt me, I'm not through.
There's more.
Yeah, I lie a lot.
If you need protection, Nick Escalante is your man.
Who put you in emergency?
The pretty boy's name is Danny DeMarco.
Heat, it doesn't get any hotter. Rated R.
Starts Friday. Check your local newspaper.
I think Heat is just like a really genuinely good film. I mean, Burt's playing a really neat, interesting character in that. He's like a gambling addict. It's keeping him from, it's holding him back from wanting to go to Venice and kind of accomplish his dreams. Then you got like Peter McNichol, who's great.
I love the way those two play off each other in this movie. It's never a pairing I would have come up with in a million years. Like, you could have asked me to cast this 27 different ways, and I don't think I ever would have put the two of them together, but it's really fun.
Yeah, and Peter McNichol is just really good in that, like like in this day and age, everyone talks about, toxic masculinity, and Peter McNichol's basically, wanting to be a tough guy, but the way that he goes about explaining why he wants to do it, and he has that like really kind of sad story about the guy that he sees with a sign on his back saying, "Please don't hit me," and how he doesn't want to be that guy. He doesn't want to be just, that pathetic person, who can't defend themselves. I mean, that kind of gets to me, I mean, that was really well done, that whole thing.
And it's so strange that this film came out as well as it did. It has, again, we're still in the same realm that it still has a bad rap. It was a $17 million budget and made 2.8 at the box office. All of these movies were just tremendous busts. But I'm a little surprised that this one did as poorly as it did. The production on this is sort of a studio's worst nightmare. You started with Dick Richards, who at that point was he coming off Farewell My Lovely at that point? Was that that was shortly before with Robert Mitchum, and that was well regarded. He comes on here, and he and Burt are clashing. Reynolds punched him, and later Richards sued for, I can't even remember what the sum was, but they settled for $50,000. So Reynolds always called it the $50,000 punch.
Well, you know who else I really like in Heat is, I mean, I really like her. It's Karen Young as the prostitute. It's saying something that Karen Young steals every scene she's in that movie. I mean, I think. I mean, even with Burt in the scene, I can't take my eyes off Karen Young's, that weird kind of accent she has in it. I don't know what she's
going for there.
But I love it. I don't know what she's going for, but
it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me. I mean, it's that again that it seems to come together from all sorts of disparate pieces, and and to think Robert Altman was the original director too. He cast the film and worked one day and then quit, which is such a bizarre concept. Like, of all the Wizard of Oz things that happen behind the scenes in Heat, that Robert Altman was the original director of a Burt Reynolds movie, a Burt Reynolds crime drama. It's some otherworldly stuff there. Written by William Goldman.
Oh yeah. It bums me out that that one in particular gets lost in the shuffle. And like I say, it's got like everybody in there, maybe with the exception of the bad guy who's pretty, one-dimensional, but Karen Young and McNichol and Reynolds, that guy that plays the gangster that judges him, and I forget his name, but he's really good. He's always good, playing that type of role. And
Howard Hessman's in there, and
yeah. That surprised me. I totally forgot he was in it when I was watching it. Yeah, it's and the ending kind of surprised me. I won't give any spoilers in case anybody wants to watch it, just regarding Peter McNichol. But
well, I mean, we sold Peter McNichol. I mean, we can sell this as the best of the three movies we're talking about. And maybe that'll encourage to step back.
Yeah, I was talking to you on Twitter the other day about Baby Driver and how it had kind of like a classic era vibe to it, and I think Heat has that kind of same thing, that kind of unironic thing.
Yeah, I think people want movies to aspire to something greater, and sometimes it's just entertainment. And I don't know what people wanted out of Baby Driver. I'm not going to try and pick people's brains about their expectations. For Edgar Wright has made some very good films, but they're all really pure entertainment. And that's the way I feel about Heat. It aspires to nothing tremendous. It's easy to see why it got lost in the shuffle and kind of forgotten in Burt's career, especially when it's flanked by Stick and Malone, and they all get lumped together.
Malone, everything about that movie it feels like a Chuck Norris movie to me. Like like Burt accidentally got put in a Chuck Norris movie by mistake.
She wants his body.
They came to kill you. I know.
He wants his soul.
Ours is an American cause.
Now they both want him dead. Burt Reynolds, Lauren Hutton, and Cliff Robertson. Malone, rated R. Starts Friday, May 1st at a theater near you.
The only thing that's memorable about that is the explosion.
Yeah, and and that whole Malone reminds me a lot, plot-wise, to a certain degree, of Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze.
Sorry, we're closed. Well, then what are all these people doing here?
Drinking and having a good time.
Well, that's why we're here.
You're too stupid to have a good time.
With Cliff Robertson playing the Ben Gazzara, you know, the big boss of the town or whatever, you know, and Burt's just kind of like passing through, and he gets stuck in this, you know, this hick town with a crazy rich guy. And there's really nothing about Malone that I like, just because it does feel like a Chuck Norris movie to me, because I don't really like a lot of Chuck Norris movies. I mean, like, it feels like a 90s Chuck Norris movie, not like a really good 70s Chuck Norris movie.
If you want to insult somebody, you call him a 90s Chuck Norris movie.
Right.
All right, let's skip ahead to Switching Channels, 1988 remake of Front Page and His Girl Friday, starring Burt Reynolds, Christopher Reeve, and Kathleen Turner.
The police have captured the infamous Southside sniper.
Christie's having one of those days.
How could you do that to Blaine?
Blaine who?
You! Former investigative reporter plays ex-husband in TV studio.
Dear?
I have seen some lowlifes in my time in this business. You meet them all. You are the worst.
Kathleen Turner.
Good evening.
Burt Reynolds. Christopher Reeve. Switching Channels. Rated PG. Now playing at a theater near you.
Look, I love Kathleen Turner, okay, but I think she's like the part of that movie that really doesn't work. It's kind of like, it kind of would be, when I watch Kathleen Turner in Switching Channels, it's kind of like if they had cast Marilyn Monroe instead of Rosalind Russell in His Girl Friday. You know, I mean, it's just, she just does not work in that part. And I thought the same thing about V.I. Wachowski. I didn't think she worked as that kind of character either.
Yeah, Hollywood forgot what to do with her, which is really a shame. She was so good. Yeah,
you know,
she was so good throughout the 80s, and then we get to this tail end, and I don't know if it was a matter of the genre shifting, or whether they thought that this was like comedy was her bag. She's good at the situational, light humor. I mean, the Romancing the Stone is filled with wonderful little moments.
Yeah.
But she's not a comedian. Yeah. She's not gonna set you up and give you a punchline.
Right.
She's a powerhouse in movies where she gets the opportunity to explore multiple areas, like comedy, drama. I just watched Peggy Sue Got Married. I've forgotten how moving she is when she's revisiting the nostalgia of her teenage years and seeing her relatives again, and you know, it's set up to be a joke, and she plays it as this tremendous moment of pathos.
She's also able to do something interesting in that movie, be an adult and be a teenager.
Right.
You
it's
know,
a very hard. It was a very hard performance, and you see her acting circles around Nicolas Cage doing that really weird voice thing, which I'm so glad she called that out in her interview for Vulture, because I always wondered what the hell was going on in that, because Nicolas Cage is just not acting the same movie as everyone else.
Well, then you also got like Jim Carrey's in it,
who's playing it more straight than Nicolas Cage. Yeah,
and that Jim Carrey is not being subtle in that.
No,
so that tells you how bad Nicolas Cage is doing.
So in Switching Channels, all three of the leads seem to be kind of acting in different movies, and I like all of them individually, and I like the movie, but it is certainly an unusual accumulation of star power here, and it's even stranger when you consider that the Burt Reynolds role is originally supposed to go to Michael Caine.
Oh, I didn't know that. That would be interesting.
So
I mean, I think Burt's good in that role, though. You know, I mean, I think that's good casting. But again, it should have been Ann Archer playing off him, or someone lively. You know. Again, it's just. I think it's mainly a Kathleen Turner problem, a casting problem. You know, I mean, I think that it's interesting, but again, you can't help constantly think of His Girl Friday and the comparison and how much better His Girl Friday is. That's the problem with those type of movies.
Yeah, especially it's so close to that source too. His Girl Friday.
Yeah.
When the rat-a-tat-tat dialogue doesn't quite gel like it does with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, which is it's unfair to hold anyone up to that standard, let alone two people who legendarily hated each other in Kathleen Turner and Burt Reynolds, and Christopher Reeve, who is kind of spoofing himself in very unusual and interesting ways. I mean, the glass elevator scene in particular.
I think Christopher Reeve is an underrated comedian. I mean, I think like Christopher Reeve in Noises Off, I think is freaking hilarious. And I think he's funny in this. I mean, Christopher Reeve works for me in this.
He does, and Noises Off. I agree. Noises Off is a great film. Another one of those that doesn't seem to get any recognition. And Reeve, I always liked as an actor. He could do a little bit of everything, and I think he's good here. What's funny, I think, is the director that took care of switching channels was Ted Kutcher, who is responsible for First Blood and Weekend at Bernie's.
Okay.
I mean, two kind of bookends of the career. He didn't really have a mojo. He was kind of a work for hire guy. He made a name for doing Wake and Fright as well. I wouldn't say Reynolds is ever a problem. I think that everyone just wasn't quite on the same page.
I remember seeing it. I saw it, at the movies when it came out, and I remember my sister wanted to go, and my sister's not into classic film at all. And I thought, well, maybe it'll work for her, but it didn't. I mean, it's just like she thought it was terrible.
I remember watching it quite frequently. We had the VHS, and it was something I popped in, regularly. I enjoyed it. This was before I had seen either Front Page or His Girl Friday. Watching it again after seeing those certainly changes your overall perception of it, but. As a modern entity on its own, if we're not putting it up to comparison with one of the greatest screwball comedies ever made, it's perfectly reasonable, and it sort of expands the Burt Reynolds filmography in interesting ways. I like it, and I do recommend that people watch it. It's a fun comedy, as long as you don't go in expecting His Girl Friday. It's also sort of a knock against it that it was nominated for 2 Raspberries, one each for Reeve and Reynolds, which I think is entirely unfair.
I tell people, because I got some friends that like watching a classic film with a modern day remake back to back. I mean, some friends and I have kind of like this. Not annual, but maybe every couple of years, we get together and watch Casablanca back to back with Barbed Wire. And it's like, we need to do His Girl Friday and switching channels, throw that into the mix. I think it's fun to compare. Again, if you're going into it for the first time and you're thinking, ooh, a remake of His Girl Friday, you're going to be disappointed. But if you look at it like a science project, it's kind of fun.
I think that's definitely the way to approach it, scientifically.
Yeah.
Burt was notoriously all about the science.
Right. You can tell, with his career. He's throwing everything in those test tubes, see what works. Yep. But those 3 films, they don't work 100% except for Heat, but
I think these films work better once you've kind of sampled the major works in Burt Reynolds' filmography, and then you come back to this era and you look at what he's done and where he went as an actor and what he tried to do by constantly shifting perception, because I know that who wouldn't get sick of being shoehorned into the good old Southern boy, American beer drinking, car driving guy? Like, if your entire career is spent driving a Trans Am, that's got to be something you'd want to break away from. And this was an attempt to do one of those career reinventions that failed, and that's an interesting footnote on an otherwise tremendous and very long Hollywood career. And I mean, he must have tried to reinvent himself 3 or 4 times, and he was constantly shifting genres and trying new things, and he's not given credit for that, or even trying. I mean, people see him as the Bandit, and that's it.
I don't even think people understand that he's doing it. I don't even think it's a matter of not giving him the credit for it. I just don't think they know. I just don't think they think it's happening.
Right.
It's kind of like this sort of hand wavy, dismissive thing. And I tend to look at every movie I see in the context of either the time period or the person's career. I mean, I grew up in the late 60s and throughout the 70s, so I saw all these at the movies, so I can't help but look at it with that kind of historical context. It's kind of the same thing with Gene Wilder. When you look at Gene Wilder's career, from Willy Wonka to some of his bombs that he did, like Woman in Red, or that type of stuff, and and seeing everything he did in between. And it's the same with Burt, when you see the beginnings of his career, like 100 Rifles or something like that. You watch all those movies and you see where he lands, in the 90s and the early 2000s, and it's like a really interesting career.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Thank you for coming on and chatting 80s Burt with us. This is good.
No problem. It's fun. I promise next time I'll have a good Carrie Lowell joke. I couldn't think of nothing.
I'm going to expect at least 4 or 5.
Let me just ask you about these films, that are always about, like, you as a trucker and stuff. You're this kind of piece of meat with a cowboy hat on. Why did you go in that direction rather than, start swinging into the little, the more classier zones?
Well,
Was that intentional? You thought, I'm just going to stay in these little...
No. It's intentional. I thought, I just want to make bad movies. What do you mean it's intentional? You do what you're offered. You take the best that's offered.
I heard you turned down Terms of Endearment, which could
I didn't turn it down because your IQ drops 100 points if you say that. I promised someone I would do another film at that time, and like a jerk, I didn't realize that if I'd have just said to Jim Brooks, will you wait for me, he would have said sure. But I didn't say that. And he got,
so you made it Smokey the Bear 2 or something instead of Terms of Endearment?
No, it was worse than that.
What was it?
I hate to tell you.
Tell me, come on.
Cannonball.
I'd like to welcome back Brian Saur, who's graciously decided to come back after 11-year absence to talk about Breaking In.
Yes, sir. Another favorite Burt movie for me. It was one of those movies that made me appreciate Burt. I think I had a weird impression of Burt in the 80s and 90s. Like, he was just that big movie star, and it was not I didn't feel like he was my movie star necessarily for some reason.
Well, he was,
but,
we're roughly the same age bracket here, and he was kind of a different generation. I didn't really become a Burt fan until the last 5-6 years, when I really went back and started seeing movies that were beyond Burt per se, Breaking In included. They were subtle performances rather than Burt, and that's what really made me appreciate him. You're talking about like the musical At Long Last Love and stuff like that was just kind of swept aside by critics and the public. And Breaking In is another one that, despite having a named director in Bill Forsyth, he wasn't really a populist director by any means, but I mean, he's a real goddamn director. And this movie kind of disappeared. Yeah, it's too bad, because for me, I like Burt in Boogie Nights as much as the next person, but it's not like the gigantic comeback role I think sometimes it's attributed to be. I mean, it is in a lot of ways, but I don't mean comeback. I guess I mean the bringing us Burt again in this way.
and showing it shows the acting, it shows what he can do. But I guess I've never been as blown away by Burt. Like, I like Burt in the movie, but he's not in it that much. And anyway,
yeah, well, I think part of the problem is that everybody kind of undervalued Burt as an actor.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about, Burt. Burt wasn't an actor. Burt was a ham that made a bunch of redneck movies. So Boogie Nights, while billed as a revelation, was really Burt doing what he'd done. But he was getting the opportunity to do it in a very visible production by someone, for someone who knew what he was getting.
Yeah, and who was clearly going to be somebody and made a really great movie that caught the zeitgeist in the right way.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Like, to me, Burt Reynolds in Breaking In is what I think some people think he is in Boogie Nights, or think they're getting in Boogie Nights for the first time or something. And he's just really, like you said, subtle, and it's truly one of my favorite. Like, I prefer the movie to the end, and I like the end, but it's one of my favorite Burt performances in all the performances he's done, and it's not in any way flashy. It's very low key. I should say the story is basically of a sort of over the hill safecracker who happens upon a, like, I guess, slacker kid played by Casey Siemaszko.
It's kind of a meet cute, really.
It is. Burt is robbing a house that Casey Siemaszko's character has this raw ability to be a criminal. So he likes to break into houses, and he like short sheets people's beds. He takes their food. He watches TV. He's a weird, unfocused kid. Very strange. But so he and Burt run into each other, and neither one wants to act like they shouldn't be there. But neither one knows the other is breaking into the house. So they kind of do this song and dance around each other. Burt makes some excuse about what he's there for, and it is a really good meet cute. I like it a lot. But anyway, he takes Casey Siemaszko under his wing, and starts to teach him to be a thief and how he sets up jobs on a small scale. It's like a low-key comedy version of Thief, maybe with I mean, that's how I guess how you
can see that.
Yeah.
Ernie is an artist, an expert, a master at what he does.
I'm a currency relocator.
Mike is just breaking in.
I think they'd notice that one.
You and I are in the same business, kid.
Huh?
Monkey business.
Ever need an assistant?
Tonight.
It's not a job for everyone.
What?
These pants legs are a little long.
Well, let's go home.
But he's learning the ropes from the best in the business.
Put your hands in your pocket. They like hands.
The Samuel Goldwyn Company and Act 3 Productions present Breaking In, a comedy directed by Bill Forsythe and written by John Sayles that teaches you everything you need to know about psychology.
You start thinking about who you're stealing from. Might as well pack it in and become a social worker.
Chemistry.
So today, Mr. Wizard teaches you how to make liquid explosive.
Sex education.
Were you ever a cheerleader?
No, but did you want me to be one?
No,
because you should have said something. Because I could do that right now if you want. I could get some things.
Driver's ed.
Whose is that?
Well, it's mine.
It ain't no white man's car. Shit, it ain't no black man's car either.
Ethics.
Where'd you get that apple?
Up there.
Next time you want an apple, you buy it.
And economics.
You paid her, didn't you?
Yeah.
I thought she liked me.
She did like you. She said she liked you.
Well, then maybe she didn't want to pay. I mean, I never paid before.
Yes, you did. In one form or another, you did. Trust me.
Whoever said there's no honor among thieves?
Holy moly! Trust me with the money?
Hey, you trust me with the money?
Yeah.
Never met guys like Mike.
Mike Lefebvre.
And Ernie.
Ernie what?
Ernie's a no.
Burt Reynolds, Casey Siemaszko, Breaking In.
Hey, Ernie, we doing the right thing?
No. You're doing the wrong thing, kid. We're thieves, remember?
But it's I came to it because of John Sayles. I went on a huge John Sayles run in the early 90s, and I was watching everything I could that I could get my hands on, and I started seeing all the scripts that he had done, the alligators, the piranhas, that kind of thing. And then I came across this, and he wrote the script for this one, And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. And I was already a 3 O'Clock High fan, so I was like, why not? And yeah, it's just one that I've really come to like a lot. It's very much a, as you might expect from Bill Forsyth, it's just a character comedy, foibles and all.
And there's something about John Sayles' words and Burt Reynolds. I don't know if that was just me, but they seem to really fit together.
Yeah. No, I can't explain that, but I think you're right.
And I really wish they had more of an opportunity, because I feel like they're kind of kindred spirits as well. Like, you listen to John Sayles talk, and they just seem to fit together.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me to think that they do, considering that you've got, one of the, hottest box office stars of, big Hollywood of his era and beyond, and then Mr. Independent Filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so you wouldn't think the two would go together, but,
No.
I feel what you're saying. It's great.
And I feel like this I don't really have a whole lot to base it on. I mean, we've got this movie. I mean, expectations for this could be damning. It just doesn't. It doesn't do what you expect, and when it still manages to avoid and usurp your expectations in the end, you're kind of wondering, well, what was that exactly?
Yeah.
Upon reflection, and it was my second rewatch that I came to decide that the Sayles and Burt combo was just an unexpected delight. And I don't want to say too much about the ending, but the ending is what really, really does it.
Yep.
But it pushes
feels,
all the right buttons.
Yeah, it feels true to, Sayles and his sort of abilities and his take on movies. He's a self-aware writer and an incredibly intelligent and naturalistic writer. So it's clear he's going to want to do something to try and, to at least be aware of your expectations, and then, hold it to the last minute to let you know what he's going to do, kind of. But in that low-key way, which all of it, yeah. But, yeah, I think this one didn't catch as much for me outside of liking the Burt performance. I was like, wow, I've just never seen him like this at the time I watched it. But it didn't catch as much for me until the second and third time I watched it. And then I was just like, oh man, I just adore this. I really like this a lot.
It is playing against Burt type, because in this movie, Burt's the one that's the realist. He's the one that, doesn't want to stand out or spend any of the money. He's saving it all away, and he's trying to calm this wild and rambunctious kid who takes every chance to flaunt his earnings and wealth. And Burt's constantly going, hush hush, lay low, and try not to be noticed. And that's really not what you expect. I guess at this point in Burt's career, you don't know what to expect, though. I mean, the 80s were such a wash for him critically and commercially.
Yeah, I mean, there's still several in here I haven't seen. Physical Evidence I haven't seen. There's a few others, but yeah, it is not necessarily his decade in terms of consistency. So, but yeah,
they
at
were
that
consistently
point,
poorly regarded. That was his consistency.
Yeah, that's fair. Rent-A-Cop definitely consistently poorly regarded, which I don't totally agree with. I just know that it's often the butt of jokes, and it's got its fans too.
You start with Stroker Ace in 1983, and just about every movie he made in the 80s has been a punchline for something. I don't agree with all the assessments. I think there's a number of films in there that are worth watching.
Absolutely.
But they were definitely the butt of many jokes. And out of curiosity, I looked at the IMDb ratings. Not that they're anything to go on, but it is a sort of gauge of widespread popular opinion. Breaking In is the highest of the 80s output, starting with Stroker Ace, that whole run. 83 to 89 at 6.2.
Okay.
And most of them are around 5, which is
wow,
really quite poor on IMDb.
Heat's. We were talking about Heat before we started. Is that low too?
It's all all of
the 5 range?
Stick, Heat, Malone, all 5.5, 5.6, 5.7. Yeah.
That is a bunch of hogwash.
It
I
is.
tell you.
It is considering that. Let's see. What was Rent-A-Cop? Did he even write that one? Rent-A-Cop was 4.4 for a point of comparison.
Wow. Yeah. Especially with Heat, and I like Stick and Malone too, but Heat is, and I won't get. I know you've already discussed that, but that's a gem too, and for that to be rated so low is ridiculous.
It gets to the point where I think that there's just expectations, and expectations override any actual subjectivity. Especially when we're talking about his mid-'80s output. I don't think people ever gave it a shot, especially going back to watch it.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, if there is any kind of bright side at all to his passing, it's that people will dig into all of it, because there's a lot, and I feel like a lot of people haven't seen a lot of it. So
I don't think they have. I think they've seen it. I think they've seen a lot of these movies, but
well, and I think that's the other downside to being a Burt, is that you think Burt just shows up and is Burt all the time, and so you see one of his movies, you've seen any of his movies, he's interchangeable, and that's I get it. I get why that happens with big stars, but yeah, you're cheating yourself if you're not. If you've made that assumption, you're missing some great Burt movies that aren't just Burt movies. You know,
it's the downside to being the most visible and popular person in the world for a significant period of time. I mean, the 1976 to 1980, really.
Yeah.
I mean, is an amazing run.
He's box office champing it for most of that period, and that's crazy.
Like I said, and talking about the end, I mean, a really unusually constructed black comedy melodrama. I don't know how else to made $44 million.
That just still blows my mind.
It's so bizarre. I saw that number and I had to double check. Like, I couldn't believe that was true. And this is from. I mean, I liked the movie.
No, but it says something huge about how big he was right then.
Yeah, I don't even know if we don't even have a point of comparison today. I mean,
I can't think of one.
No single person is that big. I mean, Tom Cruise is really the last movie star, and even he can't do that kind of business outside of Mission Impossible.
Yeah, no, he's not doing suicide comedy anytime soon.
No, he's not a draw on his own anymore. I mean, you saw what happened with his other projects recently. The Jack Reacher films didn't fare all that well, and The Mummy certainly wasn't exactly a smash.
Yeah, no, I do understand how we are evolving past that. I mean, Hollywood has always been a place of like interchangeable stars, which, because of the industry, not because of the actors, because I think the actors continue to be great, far past the time that Hollywood's given up on them. But yeah, I feel like we're seeing that slip away, and I know I'm gonna miss it when it's totally gone.
Yeah, I mean, you lose that character-driven film is the greatest loss when you lose the star performance and the star power that some of these actors could bring. And I mean, that we haven't really seen that since late 90s.
Yeah, no, I guess it's basically been gone for a long time. So.
But
true.
Yeah, so as we touched on earlier, the bright side to losing Burt is that there really does seem to be a rediscovery of a number of these films and a renewed public interest. I mean, I've been repping Hooper a lot lately as the movie that Bandit fans didn't see, and people have actively sought out Hooper, and that's great. And I hope that people will take the opportunity to see some of the movies we're talking about today. I mean, The End, Heat. We even recommended switching channels earlier.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I mean, I'm obviously for Sharky's Machine.
Yep.
I mean, he's got so much stuff that, I guess cinephile / Burt fans know, but the public who would still enjoy it haven't yet given it a shot. And I'm really excited because I've been touched to see, my social media timelines lit up with Burt watches, whether they be Best Little Whorehouse or Smokey or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that kind of excitement. Again, it often comes from a place of,
it's unfortunate that it usually takes the demise of such an actor to reinvigorate the population. But it's better late than never. And I noticed on Amazon, somebody told me that they couldn't find a copy of Cannonball Run.
Whoa.
And I was like, that can't be true. And I looked up on Amazon. They're like out. The DVD was selling for like $20-something, and
holy
the
smokes.
Blu-ray wasn't even available. I'm like, well, good for everybody, I guess, that they're finally getting around to picking up the Cannonball Run Blu-ray. But it's a start.
Yeah, definitely. But no, I really appreciate you asking me to do this because I am a big fan of his, and he hasn't come up on. I mean, he's come up on the show. We got a nice Pure Cinema interview with Adam Rifkin talking about The Last Movie Star. He had some great Burt stories and some Burt picks, and so we did do a little bit of Burt on the show, but not as much as I would like. Based on how I feel about him, I like him a lot.
That was a great episode, and he was a wonderful storyteller there.
Yeah,
talking about the movie. I still have yet to pick it up, and I need to do that.
Last Movie Star?
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
It's on Amazon Prime. If anybody wants to see it, I think they can check it there too.
Well, there's another one for everybody.
Yeah. So much Burt.
So there's
plenty of time.
So much Burt. I'll probably be trying to sneak in a few more overdue Burt watches this week before I get into the horror viewing, the required horror viewing. Too bad Burt never did horror. That's the one thing he didn't do, I guess.
Didn't he do like one?
Let's see. Now I'm interested.
It wasn't The Mangler, but it was like The Mangler. It was something like, hold on a second.
Though I did see that volleyball movie that he did. What the hell is that called? That was pretty horrifying.
Wait, volleyball movie?
Cloud Nine.
I have not seen that.
Yep.
All right,
Cloud 9,
I gotta do.
Co-starring D.L. Hewley, Angie Everhart, Paul Rodriguez. Yeah, it was something.
Paul Rodriguez.
Yeah, 2006, wow. Cloud 9. It's pretty
okay.
Damn terrible.
I gotta watch it with Side Out or something like that.
Oh yeah, if you pair it with something, I think you can probably come up with a good combo to do that. There's some famous volleyball players stop by, but I saw it used. And I'm like, well, I have to buy this. Clearly. Yeah, no, I would have too. Is it only on VHS? Oh no, it's a DVD. I found it on DVD. Oh, nice. Yeah. All right, good. All right, dang it! I know that there's. Oh, The Maddening. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, The Maddening. Oh, there, yeah. He goes. It says Burt Reynolds finally goes completely insane in this psycho horror flick about a deranged father who'll stop at nothing to protect his family secrets. I never did. Yeah, I never did see this one, but now I have to. And this could have been a pick. I mean, I doubt it's going to be a mind blower, but it's got Josh Mostel, William Hickey. I feel like I saw somebody else in it. Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned the horror thing because this wouldn't have occurred to me to even look for it had you not said something like that. Well, I offhand thoughts really resulted in something worthwhile here. Look at what this director's done. Wow, he's done some terrible stuff. Yeah, it's John Huston's kid. Danny Huston directed it. It's crazy. Look at that. That is crazy. Anyway, yeah, so that's something I got to check out. Another
cool thing that came out of this. But like I said, I do appreciate being asked.
Yeah, no, I wanted to make sure I knew a select few people who were most definitely worthy of some Burt love, and you were at the top of the list because I know we talked Burt a couple of times.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and filling out some Burt love, and yeah.
My pleasure. I can't wait to hear the whole thing because I'm sure it's going to spur me to want to watch more Burt, which I have no problem with at all.
You did a film, Boogie Nights, that people absolutely loved, and I'm told that you turned down the offer to do that movie 7 times.
That's true. I have a hard time with that whole, I'll better use another adjective. I have a difficult time looking. It just wasn't my kind of film. You know?
Right.
So I
the
thought
subject matter of making pornographic films and all that made you uncomfortable.
It did. It made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid they might recognize me.
Is this true that you we were even after shooting the movie, I'm told that you were so uncomfortable about making the movie that after the movie was done, before you had even seen it, you wanted to hit the director, Paul Thomas Anderson. You wanted to hit him in the face.
No, I didn't want to hit him in the face. I just wanted to hit him. I don't think he liked me.
Really?
No.
He had such a, I mean, you gave such a brilliant performance in that film.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you really did, and perfect for that role. I heard at the time that you didn't even want to see yourself in Boogie Nights. Have you seen it yet? Have you seen
No, I haven't seen it.
You haven't watched it?
No, I don't want to see it.
It's fantastic. Come on. You could come to my place. We could watch Boogie Nights and get comfortable.
Oh, I might do that.
Okay, all right. I screen it regularly.
Because you're gonna bookend bookend the entire episode here.
Oh my gosh.
No pressure. I didn't mean to throw that out there. But you are opening and closing the Burt special. So let's talk about Boogie Nights.
Okay. Well, Boogie Nights, I mean, it's absolutely my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And this was a surprise to me when I didn't see it in the movie theater when it came out. We rented it, and I remember being like, "Oh, I do not want to see this. It's about porn. I mean, this is not my thing." And my husband was like, "No, I read an article about it," and I was like, "Okay, we'll try it." And I was just blown away with how good it is. I really, really enjoyed it.
Everyone's given one special thing, right? Everyone's blessed with one special thing. I want you to know I plan on being a star. A big, bright, shining star.
Eddie Adams from Torrance.
Yep.
Jack Horner, filmmaker. I make exotic pictures.
In 1977, a kid from nowhere.
Maybe think about your name.
My name, yeah.
Something a little pizzazz.
Dirk Diggler. Good name.
I like your name a lot.
Had a dream of getting somewhere.
Jack Horner has found something special in newcomer Dirk Diggler.
So let me just pop in this 8-track, and you just give a listen, tell me what you think, okay?
It was a time when disco was king.
These are the ones. These are great.
Yeah, those are really cool. Are they lizard?
No, they're Italian.
So you like my shoes?
They're pretty cool.
Sex was safe.
Woohoo!
Pleasure was a business.
Cut. Terrific. Nice work.
And business was booming.
And the award for Best Newcomer goes to Mr. Dirk Diggler.
Wow.
Goodbye, 1979. Hello, 1980. Are you ready?
But in 1980...
Come on, you puppies!
The party was over.
You are fired! What? You're fired!
It's jealousy, it's deceitfulness, it's vindictiveness, but, I mean, God, what can you expect when you're on top?
Oh, wait.
Not this part.
New Line Cinema presents a portrait of 2 decades in the life of a business, the days of a dreamer, and the nights in between. Boogie Nights.
And there's so many really good performances in it. It's hard to even pick out, you know, you have, Wahlberg, I think, really knocked it out of the park in this. He did a great job.
This is the first time I think I considered him an actual actor. He's always going to be Marky Mark to me. Like I can't ever. I will almost never call him Mark Wahlberg in any conversation. But this is the first time I definitely noticed him as an actor.
Yeah, he's does a really good job. There's a scene when he's at Alfred Molina's house, and the camera fixes on him for a while he's trying to decide what to do, and he sort of looks like he's zoning out because he's so drug addled and probably hasn't slept in a week or something. And then he just gets up and says, "Okay, we're going to go now." But the expression on his face, I remember thinking like, "Wow, it was really good," and that you could have done something really very big, very over the top. But he really doesn't. I mean, he's actually kind of subtle, even though, there are times when he's all coked out that he's ranting and raving and stuff. But that seems sort of normal, for someone who's all coked out. But all the performances, and Burt, I really like in this. I mean, it's hard not to like his character, too, because he plays the most grounded character.
You got maybe 15, 20 guys standing around just making sure that your lighting is right. But you can work out in the morning, you can work out at noon, you can work out at night. Doesn't matter. If you don't have those juices flowing down there in the Mr. Torpedo area in the fun zone. But you got to get the people in the theater, you need the big dicks, the big tits.
Uh-oh, here we go.
How do you keep them in the theater after they've come? With beauty and with acting. No, I understand. You got to get them in the theater, You got to keep the seats full. But I don't want to make a film where they show up, they sit down, they jack off, and they get up and they get out before the story ends. It is my dream. It is my goal. It is my idea to make a film that the story just sucks them in. And when they spurt out that joy juice, they just got to sit in it. They can't move until they find out how the story ends. I want to make a film like that. And I understand, they have to make films. I made them myself, that are a few laughs. Everybody fucks their brains out, and that's fine. But it's my dream to make a film that is true and right and dramatic. You sure you don't want a fresca?
He plays Jack Horner. I mean, the movie, if you haven't seen it, is a dramatization of things that happened in the 70s and early 80s porn industry in California. And it talks about different issues like moving from film to video, and moving from more produced films that were with actual actors, even though they might not be the best actors, they were actually actors. That's what they did. They were in porn films, but they were actors. To just video shooting anybody doing, things to one another. Which, when the 80s came and you have all the VHS and things like that, I guess that's part of that, is that you could just make these quickies in 5 seconds with anybody off the streets. So it goes from it's almost like the studio system kind of, it's like old Hollywood versus, but it's in the porn industry, and it's kind of interesting, and it deals with all these characters who are almost like a little family. And part of the reason they're a family is because they've probably been ostracized by their own families, and you see that in a couple of instances where Wahlberg is fighting with his mother, and where Julianne Moore is trying to gain access to custody of her son, or just to see her son, and her husband, John Doe, which cracks me up, is fighting her on the custody issue and stuff like that. But, so they're ostracized from their real, biological families, and so they sort of form a family of their own around and they're all, in the porn industry. But you get to like them.
Yeah, the best part of the movie is the way that it supplies plenty of empathy for these characters. It's not judging them.
No,
it's funny and satirical, but it's never using these characters, these people, and the porn industry as the butt of the joke.
No, it really isn't. I mean, and I wondered how it would be before I saw it, and I, as I said, I was not excited to see this movie, but it's just excellent. I mean, from just the relationships, and you're trying to figure out what the relationship between Burt Reynolds and Julianne Moore really is, because it seems to be asexual, but they live together. And then, then you have Heather Graham as Roller Girl, who's sort of their de facto daughter, because here he is telling her to clean up her room and stuff the way a dad would, and so there's that kind of thing. And then, I don't know, it's really neat. Like, I kind of, you like the characters. Reed Rothschild he's really funny. What's his name? John C. Reilly?
John C. Reilly, yeah.
Yeah. He does a great job in this film.
Well, I mean, the cast is ridiculous. Like, everybody that's in here is recognizable from... Yeah. I mean, you go all the way down, like, Robert Downey Sr.'s in here. Alfred Molina has a small role. Ricky Jay pops up. Thomas Jane, Philip Baker Hall, all these people.
Right.
In many ways, it reminds me of what Altman was doing in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, the first time I saw this film, that's what I thought. I thought this is a modern Altman film. And in a way, it's tighter than an Altman film. Because, I mean, there are aspects of Altman's films. I don't love all of Altman's films. I like a lot. I like quite a few of them I really enjoy. But some of them are just so sort of meandering that it's hard for me to really sort of gain purchase. You're watching it going, I can't get into this because he's so all over the place. But this one, I thought, this is Altman, very tight Altman.
This is like Nashville to me, the way that that pulls together.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I definitely can see that. But, but as you said, yeah, even the small parts, like Joanna Gleason playing his mother, that she's a real, she's a really good actress, and she has a nice part. And she's only on screen for 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops. Yeah. But she has a nice part, and it's memorable. And all of the Philip Baker Hall, Philip Seymour Hoffman it's amazing how chameleon-like he really could be, because this is so different from other parts I've seen him in. But he completely disappears into this role. But they all do. It's a really well-acted film, but it's also really well-directed. And just down to the touches. And I liked the costumes. The music is appropriate. It's just a really good film. But Burt Reynolds' character is, as I said, I think the most grounded, because he's not on drugs, which some of them are at different times in the film. So he seems to be fairly straight-laced in terms of being on drugs and stuff. And he's in charge. And he is sort of the father figure of all these people. So he has and there's some gravitas to him as he walks in the room. He carries himself really well in this, and he is in charge. And like when at a point when he gets challenged by Mark Wahlberg, just drugs and acting crazy and stuff like that, and he challenges Burt Reynolds' authority. Burt's great in that part, and he just really slaps him back, But you see his face change from, okay, why don't you go sit down, to, don't you F with me, buddy,
Mm-hmm.
Whip fast, and the way it would happen. Every time I watch this movie, I'm blown away by it. It's 2.5 hours, isn't it? It's really long.
It's a long film.
But it's not ever boring. There's always something cool happening. There's always some good performance on, Don Cheadle, another really great actor that's in this. I can't say enough good things about this. And Reynolds was nominated for everything, and he won a Golden Globe and every other thing. And
this is only Academy Award nomination, and he fired his agent as a result of this movie.
And the winner is Burt Reynolds' Boogie Nights.
Well, if you hang on to things long enough, they get back in style. Like me. I'm flabbergasted. I want to thank the foreign press. They don't think you're as good as your last movie. They think you're as good as your best movie. It's been real quiet for about 3 years. Seen a lot of television. I want to say that Paul, who made this picture, Thomas Anderson, who was so brave to make this film, and I kept saying, no, I can't do this picture because I bring some baggage to it that maybe you don't want. And I don't know how he thought I was going to be Father Knows Best of this picture. But I didn't want anybody with blue hair running in there and running out that grew up with me on film. And I think we, the group that was in it, the finest young actors I've ever worked with in my life, brought some humanity to it and hopefully some class. And I'm as excited just to rubberneck here with you people who I haven't seen in a long time, and God bless you all. Just remember that the old Stradivarius plays better than the new ones.
He often had testy relationships with directors, and the stories from the set indicate that he and P.T. Anderson did not get along.
Right.
After Reynolds fired his agent before the movie even came out, he saw the initial cut of the film and fired the agent, and Anderson also asked, despite their difficulties, Anderson asked him to come back to be in Magnolia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says that even though, he says it, later on he sort of Reynolds reconciled with how good this film really was later on, I guess. And
you start winning awards as a result, and I think that probably changes your perception of how you initially saw it.
Right. But I would stand by this. I think it's one of the best performances that he ever has in a film. Boogie Nights and Deliverance are probably the two performances that are just the most stellar of his career, as far as I can see. But he wouldn't go on tour. He wouldn't go on the press junket for the film, and he wouldn't talk to the press about it and all this kind of stuff, which they do say might have had something to do with his not winning the Oscar. Because he was nominated, but he didn't play the game, and he didn't, take out the ads in Variety, or for your consideration, or blah, 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 and all this kind of crap that they do. So that may have had something to do with his not winning it. I don't know who won it that year. I'd have to look it up. But which is too bad, but it doesn't take away from his performance, which I think is wonderful. Did you like it from the start?
Yeah, I did. I was a P.T. Anderson fan at that point. I'd seen Hard Eight and loved it. So I was looking forward to this. I didn't know, I couldn't quite tell what he'd gotten himself into filming a movie about the porn industry in the 70s and 80s. I was very curious, and I was very surprised at the same time. Like, I had expectations, but the film surpassed them. And it's been so long. It's hard to remember my initial reaction. You start to overwrite it with your subsequent viewings. But I know that I always enjoyed it, and I was involved in a number of debates about the film immediately afterward about the quality or worthiness of it, because I think people still did have a tough time reconciling the fact that a movie about pornography could be so insightful and interesting and really get into the characters. I think people had trouble with the way that the characters were humanized. Almost they were supposed to be cartoonish or some sort of two-dimensional caricature.
Right. I think that would have allowed people to like it if it totally put down the porn industry, if it totally put down.
Right. It wasn't broad. There was the humor wasn't broad, and it wasn't presented in a way that would have been palatable to a wide audience. But if you saw and actually cared to see what he did with the characters and how they related to each other and how they were part of this bigger industry, that it was a livelihood for many people, and not all of them were scum.
Right.
In a way, this, if we take this back to Burt's like Hooper and Smokey and the Bandit, where he's making these sort of roles or characters that would have been played for laughs or played at the expense of a certain type of demographic. He really gives them personalities, like the truckers and Smokey and the Bandit, the blue collar people that he showcases in his films, the stuntmen in Hooper. He gives these people faces and personalities, it seems, in his films. Now, I understand it wasn't, he didn't do it in Boogie Nights, but he's been associated with that kind of filmmaking throughout his career.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I really enjoyed the fact that these were people, that these were people who, I mean, and it is the same, as you said, in like White Lightning and Gator and Hooper and the Smokey and the Bandit films and all that kind of stuff. And some of them are caricatures. You have
there's
the
comic
sheriff
relief.
guy.
Yeah, there's
stuff,
comic relief. But the people that he's concerned about in these films definitely stand out.
Well, I mean, I keep thinking about in White Lightning, Matt Clark, who plays Dude, who plays like he's a mechanic. And he's been busted for moonshine, something with moonshine. I can't remember what exactly he had gotten arrested for, but he's been arrested, and so he's working with the feds too to help bring down Ned Beatty, the corrupt sheriff. But it shows him, and he's like sitting here going, man, I don't want to do this. I'm fixing cars. This is what I do. I fix cars, And he's just like, he got embroiled in this mess because, he was fixing the cars or maybe driving the cars of somebody doing moonshine. And so now he's stuck in this trap and he can't get out, And, so yeah, definitely the little guy he talks about. But things like, I don't know, there's just certain characterizations. And part of the fact in Boogie Nights, part of the fact is that he picked such an amazing cast. I mean, everybody's so talented in the cast. Macy and Cheadle and everyone, Walters. All these characters and they're so good, but it's also very well written. I can't say enough good things about Boogie Nights, and I've had conversations with people too about, they're like, well, how can you like that? It's about porn. And I'm like, well, it's not really about porn. It's about people who are in the porn industry, and how they relate to one another, how they relate to the outer world, because every time they deal with the outer world, they get screwed. Like Don Cheadle and Melora Walters, they try to get a loan so he can open a legitimate business. And because he has done porn in the past, he can't get a loan. So, right. He's trying to do things the way everybody tells him he's supposed to, and he can't because he did this thing that they don't like. And Julianne Moore is trying to gain custody of her son, or at least see her son, and she can't because of her livelihood.
I know the Oscars aren't always the greatest reflection of on-screen quality, but I can't understand how she didn't win for Best Supporting Actress that year.
She is really good. She is really well. I would imagine that part of it is that it's about pornography. It's
right.
the same, it's the same kind of thing where like comedies don't win or action films don't win, even though sometimes there's some fantastic acting in or stunts or effects or whatever. They might win for those kind of things, the special effects, but they're not going to win for acting or directing or writing. Same with comedy and same with something that's about pornography. I mean, I just feel like I'm surprised that Burt got nominated. Even though he's the pornographer and he's the least pornographic,
It's true.
in the film. Hard to say how much I love this film. I really just enjoy it so much. And I don't have this feeling for other Paul Thomas Anderson films.
And here's the supporting actor nominees for that Academy Awards. You had Robert Forster for Jackie Brown, Anthony Hopkins for Amistad, Greg Kinnear, As Good as It Gets, then Burt for Boogie Nights, and Robin Williams won for Good Will Hunting.
It was that's a good bunch of performances.
Yeah.
There's no way that Robin Williams wasn't going to win.
Oh no, that was a sure thing beforehand.
Right. And they wanted to give something to that film too, because they gave him the screenplay, I think.
Supporting actor, yeah.
Yeah. They wanted to do something good for them. They really liked they were the darlings of that Oscar, as I recall. But
it was Titanic's year.
Oh, that was Titanic?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the year I sat and watched the Oscars and threw things at the television repeatedly.
Right.
By the end of the thing, I felt like it was more like self-flagellation, like waiting for that thing to be awarded, and I didn't have anything else around me to throw.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I still haven't seen that film. It just doesn't interest me.
I haven't either, to be honest, but I definitely know I don't want to watch it. At this point, it's kind of like a morality thing. Like I've said I wouldn't watch it. And
yeah.
I
did some of the same thing. I was like, I'm not playing into your hands, Hollywood. I'm not doing it. But I've seen the Titanic movies, A Night to Remember.
Yeah.
With Kenneth Moore. I absolutely adore that film.
Raise the Titanic.
Oh, and there is another Titanic film with Barbara Stanwyck that is a little more sort of melodrama about, the families and like, oh, you go, I'll stay here, that kind of, thing, which, has some good acting in it, but it's not really a big favorite of mine. But A Night to Remember is a terrific film. That's a really good film, and it's really well made. And I'll watch anything Kenneth Moore is in because I just think he's terrific. But anyway, we digressed again.
Little bit. I just went to look up Raise the Titanic because I felt it had a connection here, and then I needed to clarify it. It's directed by Jerry Jameson, who was one of the directors on Heat with Burt Reynolds.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna bring it around. There was a point to this conversation after all. Jerry Jameson was one of the 5 directors that worked on Heat.
There were 5 directors that worked on Heat?
5 directors worked on Heat. So it was originally an Altman movie. He casted the film and then quit And then Dick Richards, was it Dick Richards? Came on, and Burt Reynolds punched him, so he left. And then Jerry Jameson came on, and he quit. Somebody else was involved. I can't remember the next director. And then Richards came back, fell off a crane during a crane shot, and had to be hospitalized.
Oh my gosh.
I can't remember who else was involved. Burt Reynolds calls Richards sued Burt Reynolds for assault for the fist fight and the punch. They settled for $50,000, and Burt Reynolds always referred to it as his $50,000 punch. I like that he came back for more after they'd run through 3 other directors, and then falls off a crane. It's really a bizarre. Yeah. It was only a 36-day shoot, I believe, as well. So there were 6 directors over the course of 36 days.
That is really something. Well, I think we've talked about it.
It's in there. That's why we have editing, and I can piece it together. Okay. But since this is the last episode or the last segment, I thank you and everybody for coming on and talking Burt and sharing all of our Burt love and loss here. It was very sad. It was a week ago yesterday that he passed, but I think we're all still feeling it, and we're all still feeling the urge to rewatch some of our favorites and go back and find some of them that we missed.
Yeah. I mean, when he died, I was kind of like, gee. It's another one of those sort of end of an era type deaths.
It really is.
Where you're just like, I grew up watching those films. Some of them in the theater, some of them later rented, from Blockbuster or somewhere. But he was such a character. Plus, he was on TV, and so he'd see him on Johnny Carson or, Dinah Shore, obviously early on. But because I remember watching all those talk shows because I had to see all the actors, because back then you didn't have the behind the scenes kind of access that you do now. That either on Blu-ray extras or, some video that somebody uploads on YouTube from a film festival.
Yeah, their star power was very carefully curated, and the only time you really got to see them step out just a little bit was on those talk shows, especially Carson. I feel like Carson got a lot out of some of these stars that were very carefully guarded. And I this past week I went back and watched some of Burt's spots on Carson, and it was remarkable to me, like the things he confessed on there to Johnny when they were just having some banter. And he's always very funny, and I used the word charming about 47 times during this episode, but even when he's talking about it could be the most mundane pieces of his existence, and he still managed to inject it all with this warm personality, and you just wanted to listen to him talk just about his life. And if I recommend it, everyone go back and just Google Burt Reynolds, look him up on YouTube, and watch some of these segments, and get a better sense of the guy behind the big smile and laugh.
Yeah, totally agree. And there's a lot of actors like that really you. And I always felt like at that time I was seeing something that no one else was seeing. It's a weird kind of feeling that because I was massively into films from birth, and there wasn't the kind of thing that there is now. So if I happened to be watching TV, a cool movie came on, because that's the only time you could see it, right? It would just show up. You didn't have there was not streaming. So if I happen to catch a gem on of a movie on TV on Sunday afternoon, I'd be thrilled. Same thing with the talk shows, and you'd be like, oh my God, Burt Reynolds is going to be on. Oh, I got to watch that because he's always so funny. And, he does the outrageous things, sprays whipped cream in Johnny Carson's pants, and, all funky stuff like that, you always felt like so cool that you got to see that, sort of let into the back room, kind of, to see some of the stuff. And so I still have memories of that. And he did. You're right. Charming is the perfect word for him. Very just affable. It seems like he's a guy that it wouldn't matter if you were just a regular person. It wouldn't matter if you were the president of a corporation or some guy he met on the street. He would talk to you the same way. That's how he seems anyway to me. And
it's funny because he was clearly a very passionate person. He was passionate with his friendships, and he was also passionately against certain people. He had a lot of legendary feuds and disagreements with directors and other personalities. So there's a lot to Burt Reynolds that I wish his memoir touches on some of that. He has 2 books that do shed some light into the man behind the Hollywood persona and legend. But I don't think we'll ever really know enough about him because there was sort of a distance between personal Burt and public Burt. But I get the sense that he was always very straightforward with people and honest, and you either loved that or hated it about him.
Right. Well, just the fact that he had these friends that he was very loyal to, and also these people that he really detested. I feel like he wasn't a two-faced guy. No. He wasn't a typical Hollywood guy who's sort of a PR maven. He was a
little rough. He was a little rough around the edges.
He was, but he was also just like, this is me.
Yep.
Take it or leave it.
Across. Yep.
Yeah. And I like that. Well, thank you very much for having me on your program. I enjoyed talking about many different movies with you and going far afield. But that's how it is when you get a good conversation about film. You always go off on tangents.
I never want to clip the tangents because you never know where you're going to go. And I think with this particular episode, it's been great for that because we've been, you get caught up talking about Burt and other stuff. And I'm probably going to do like a more tightly edited version for this episode since I've got a lot of tape for this one.
Of course.
And then I think I want to put together like a B-side of just all the great conversations we had that kind of revolved around Burt, but were not directly related because there's so much of that this week that I've captured.
Chester Brock. This is the best work we've ever done.
I mean, it's a real film, Jack.
It feels good.
You made it fly.
This is a film. I want them to remember me by.
That wraps up our Cinema Shame Burt Reynolds Memorial. I'd like to thank all of my guests for joining me in Burt Remembrance: Carrie Fristow, Christian Devine, Carrie Rickey, Brian Saur, and Grant, and the notorious Carrie Troller. If you enjoyed these episodes, be sure to take to the interwebs and spread the Cinema Shame by leaving us a friendly review or giving this to a friend and say, here, listen to this. This is all for the love of cinema, and anytime we get a mention, it warms our cockles. Next month, we'll be talking horror movies. Be sure to venture over to our website at cinemashame.wordpress.com to view our new October movie watching prompt and participate in the blogathon. Thank you to all of our listeners, and we look forward to seeing you here next month on the Cinema Shame podcast.
You have chosen wisely.